All right. Well, welcome, social media land, to Hints from HR. My name is Nicole Block. I'm a director for Brookfield Properties, and we do have my partner in crime, Ms. Becca Ramadi. She's our vice president of the Texas Apartment Association's Education Foundation. Hello, Becca.
Hello.
No, her fancy, awesome white blazer. So today we're going to talk a little bit about cross training, and we do have a special guest who is an expert in his field on it. So I'm really excited to kind of have some back and forth, so that we can really, again, just give you guys some nuggets to ask questions, so that you can become better operators, better suppliers, and really people that are interested in our industry. So I'd like to welcome Josh Haynes. Josh is Director of People Development and Experience at Madera Companies. So welcome, Josh. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So give us a quick background, just kind of how you got here, working in multifamily. Just give us a real high level, and then we'll get started.
Okay, so the high level is that I spent almost 2 decades actually as a pastor, and so I worked in churches for, like I said, almost 2 decades. Did youth ministry, was a senior pastor for a while, and to be honest with you, I met Dave Marcinkowski, who many people know in this
Yeah.
industry. And he and I started having a conversation for, I'd say, a conversation. We really had like 15 conversations over the span of about a year. And he kind of recruited me really to come over and to do a lot of the work that I'm getting to do now. I also get to see not just the people development, but I also do have conversations with folks on leadership and management, and I consult with our leaders across all of our companies and different things like that. Kind of come in every now and then with some strategic alignment help if needed,
Yeah.
conflict management, things like that. So that's been a part of my journey, and that's kind of how I got here.
Oh, that is amazing. And really, I think that lends a lot of credence to some of the things that we've been saying on our podcast, because we're always trying to find the right talent for our industry. And there's always this push and pull of experience and not new to our industry and, veterans. And so I think that's wonderful for you to take your skill set and for you and Dave to be able to translate into something that really benefits our company. Because I mean, leadership, relationships, cross training, development, alignment, all of those things are topics we discuss often. So how exciting is that for someone here who's a guest to be able to actually live that? So that's really exciting. So we'll kind of get into it. Today's topic is cross training. As many of you guys know, we've talked about growth and development. When we've looked at why people are leaving companies, they generally cite that, like, I'm looking for more growth, I'm looking for more development. Or why do you stay where you are? Well, because I feel like there's someone who cares about my growth and development. So I know that sometimes sometimes could be like a catch-all phrase, but at the same time, it's just very topical. So tell us a little bit about kind of or Madera's look into growth and development. Like how do you guys look at it and how do you approach it?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to see growth and development from a holistic perspective. And so I think we're living in a time, and I think it's even, and I would say, while we have some people maybe wish for things of the past sometimes, and I think there may be a conversation for that. I do think we've evolved into a good time when it comes to how we take care of employees, because I do think we're looking at a more holistic lens for how we care for people. We want more than just productivity. I think as employees, we want more than just money, compensation. We're having conversations about more holistic conversations about benefits when it comes to mental health and all sorts of other things as far as that goes. And then trying to provide the balance between home life and life at work, and then the back and forth, and how stresses from home come to work and how stresses at work go home, and how do we take care of people across the spectrum of things. And I think because we're looking at things more systematically, I think we can solve trends really than take care of symptoms, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. We talk about, is this a root cause or is this a symptom? And if you're only treating the symptom, you're going to continually have to treat it, right? Whereas if you don't ever take 2 or 3 or 10 or 15 steps back and look at what the root cause is of those symptoms, then you can't take a systematic approach. So I think that's wonderful. I think we definitely are realizing over the past couple of years that we come to work as a whole human, as opposed to just a number, or just like get in here, do your work and go. And it's, you don't hear as much like, hey, leave it all at the door anymore, right? We're trying to have that holistic approach, with benefits, wellness programs, or just even, just trying to be more balanced. I don't know that we always use that term work-life balance. It's more of a harmony. It's give and it's take, but it's definitely something that we just have to focus on. So I think that's wonderful that Madera is taking that approach. One piece of that is cross training, right? And so, that's our topic for today's call. And in that growth and development piece, cross training is key. Cross training is something that I think that is overlooked sometimes because people think I'm just going to jump from point A to point B, not realizing that, right there in between the gap is where that cross training really fits in. But let's talk about how I guess, present cross training to a team. Like, why is it important? What are some of the things that you share with your leadership and your site associates or anyone really, or even the corporate structure? How do you sell cross training? Why do you think it's important?
Well, I think the first thing, I mean, I don't think we've just learned this in the last few years. I mean, I'm in my 40s, and I feel like for the most part of my life, I've seen change. And I think you just have to assume that life is going to bring disruption. And I know that we've acted like that a lot since COVID and how all the things have just seemingly changed. But like I said, even at my age, I feel like my life has been change after change after change, new seasons, the world changes, the way.
Yeah.
And so I think with those disruptions, the assumption has to be that we are going to have these things happen, and then how are we prepared to deal with them?
Yeah.
If you can do preparation rather than cleanup, you are going to be much further ahead
Right.
when it comes to not just people in your industry, but just taking care of your people. They're more prepared to take care of things, and so when you kind of give it that spin, I think everybody can buy into that. We understand disruption. We understand that that is going to happen. And so by doing this and investing in not just your cross training, but investing in the cross training of others, you can take care of them, they can take care of you, and everybody can seemingly, back to your word a minute ago, find hopefully a harmony, not just with the culture, but really even with the business case as far as that goes. And so you tackle both things at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that the word preparation is key for so many of us, because I do want to kind of dispel some myths. Sometimes when I'm talking to people, they're like, hey, like they didn't care about my growth and development. And so when I dig into that, I'm like, well, what did you share as far as your intentions and what does growth and development look like for you, so you can make sure that we're giving that company or that person an opportunity to kind of meet in the middle, because sometimes people think that they may be thinking one thing, right? And we're thinking another. So I love that you're saying preparation, because and I can speak just for my career, but in several of the careers that have been, that I've known along the way, is that a lot of times my opportunities was when preparation met opportunity,
Mhm.
so it's not that anyone walked into something and, blindly, and they weren't prepared. And so I think that some of those myths, right, that I just wanted to kind of dispel that job seekers out there, be bold and say, this is what I'm looking for, so that someone can either meet you where you're at, or maybe coach you where you need to go. And I think for operators and suppliers, same thing. So, let's talk about preparation. So whenever you're cross training, what does that look like to Madera as far as like cross training and being prepared? What does that look like in a fully functioned team?
Well, I think first, and you mentioned leaders a minute ago. I think for us, you have to have great leadership, and I think that's
Mhm.
just that has to be where it starts, because I don't think you just walk on to a property or even spend time in our various teams and say, well, we're going to do cross training.
Mhm.
Because I think at that point, it can feel like, back to the selling people on why it's needed, it can seem like you're taking more from me rather than giving to me.
Yeah.
And I think when you have great leadership, and we know we've got folks like Casey Kuhn and Katie Myrick, and then of course those are our VPs of operations in DFW and in Houston. And these ladies, and the way that they see cross training as a value,
Right.
that is a core piece of who we are in order to deal with the disruptions, but also to create career paths, to create job enlargement, as far as that goes, so that they're learning more things as they go along. They can help more, but at the same time, they're setting themselves up for a future. And
Yeah.
then also kind of an enrichment that goes with that. And I think that goes with the cultural piece, where you're building teams that understand. And again, I'll give Katie and I will give Casey all the credit in the world, that they understand that when the team find success when you have a well-functioning property, everyone's career is better off. You know, everybody's cultural feel on the place is better.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a huge part of it, as it starts with your leadership. But then I think once you can get that buy-in for the cross training and they start to see that this is a better functioning property,
Right.
now all of a sudden people are hitting their bonuses. There's a greater engagement back and forth. There are friendships and camaraderie that are built, and even if it's not friendship, at least it's a respect, a healthy understanding for how each other's jobs are challenging.
Yeah.
Once you start to see all of those things and get a little bit of the success together, now all of a sudden it's like, okay, like this is just how we do it, because this
Yeah.
is the way for everyone to take steps forward rather than me having to step on people to advance my career.
Yeah, and perspective is a beautiful thing. And I think that when we gain perspective of what another office associate, another maintenance associate, another corporate associate, it's not just for, just on the site, but when you do gain that perspective of what contribution everyone does bring, whether that be by, again, cross training and or just listening sometimes, then you do tend to work together. And you also mentioned culture, another topic that I think sometimes becomes too much of a buzzword, and you really have to live that culture. And when you become a culture of trust, I know that some of the times whenever I've heard, oh, so and so just wants me to do more, like you had mentioned, right? Or that they just want me to do more, and I'm not getting anything out of this. It's a very self-centered approach because they don't see that bigger picture yet, or they don't feel the trust that I'm going to put out this extra amount of work, let's say, but Bob Smith might not do it, or this person might not do it. Until you kind of flip the switch, you can see some resistance to that. So I think by, like you said, starting with the leadership, ensuring that everyone's going to be approaching it that way is really critical, because they have to support it too. So if someone, and they have to show it and they have to cross train. But one of the things I loved whenever we did our intake was that you talked about, kind of supporting that culture was more the peace of mind. We talk about, again, that holistic approach. You're not going to be nervous about taking a vacation, because your team can handle it, whenever it may be. So can you speak about that a little bit as far as the kind of the mental side of it, or the team health perspective that you've seen at Madera?
Well, I think your word trust is important. And I think one of the things that has to be trusted, especially if we go back to the disruption piece, you mentioned vacations, but there's 1,000 other things that may disrupt a team on property, right? I mean,
Sure.
whether it's issues that take place from an operations perspective, or whether it's personal things that take place. I mean, working in HR, dealing with people who go on FMLA or have sick leave or do all the different things that kind of come in. The trust piece is that when I step up to help you out, when I need help, you will step up to help me out. And
Mm-hmm.
not just that, at the heart of it is the resident, right? Because that's the customer, right? And so help me not look bad in front of the customers, help me not look bad in front of others, right? And then in turn, I trust that when it's, or I want you to trust that when you need it, I will step up and do those types of things as well. And I think that's the kind of that golden piece, or maybe that kind of real flow that I think a team can hit when they have that type of trust and understanding. Because I think oftentimes cross training comes into play because one person on property may not be able to put out the same amount of energy that everybody else can, and that's when they have to step up. And so it's this back and forth give and take, because it's relational as much as it is business.
Oh no, no, absolutely. And we've always used the term kind of growing in place and being able to, you had also talked about just kind of an enrichment of the role or expansion of the role. And I think that whatever role they're in, knowing that they can give more again to the leadership or the culture, because leadership has no title. They could be a team lead on a community as a porter, and be a leader on that team and a leader in that company. And I think that just being able to shift that focus to where we're going to grow you in place, we're going to grow you again in your leadership or as a person, or not just as an assistant community manager. You're growing just as a professional. I think that type of growth is really important, and to be able to define it and say, look, you're growing in place. It's and sometimes setting that expectation, because we have some people entering the workforce that think that it's a trajectory like this, right? I'm going to be the CEO in 5 years. And whereas we know growth looks like this, like it's like
Yeah.
it's anything but just that straight line. And I think once you understand that you can find growth, gosh, anywhere, in any situation, in any conversation, in any task, potentially. So I'd love for you to share your thoughts on that, and maybe give some examples of where cross training or growth and development is really you've seen it flourish or you've seen it blossom. I'd love for you to share some examples.
Well, I think the first place that it needs to grow or at least kind of settle is when the cross training roles that you're asking people to do make sense as far
Mm-hmm.
as where they're coming from, right? Because I don't think you're looking at a porter on property and trying to cross train them when it comes to all of the financials of a manager, right? And so
Sure.
I think the tasks have to make sense. So there's a strategy to cross training. There's an intentionality to it that has to be there. And without that intentionality or cross training, in the cross training and in the strategy, like you're going to find massive holes and you're going to put people in positions that they shouldn't necessarily be in. And I think
Right.
that's a big part of it. And so it doesn't just happen. There's a lot of preparation, to use your word again, that goes into play in leadership side of things of like, this is what makes sense here, this is what makes sense here, and these are how these roles move together and can be complementary, if that makes sense. So I think that's part of where we see the flourishing is when there's a natural overlap between roles on property. Now, when it comes to disruption, there are times that you don't have that option, right? You don't
Yeah.
have that option. And so it's not going to be uncommon for some of our leasing specialists to be helping, kind of help turn a unit. I mean, that is part of life. It is a
Right.
need for property. And we hope, and I think we see more often than not an appreciation back and forth between one another for stepping up in those types of places.
Well, Josh, we have a whole other podcast focused on just that called How to Speak
Yeah.
Maintenance, where we want the office teams and the maintenance teams to really understand what it takes to get the job done for the maintenance team. And so
Yeah.
it really speaks to all the things that you said about it being a value, because in the end, all that collaboration, all that cross training, it helps the resident and it helps grow the individual. So everything, I've sort of been just sitting, listening and thinking, this just speaks to a lot of the really wonderful things about this industry in the career growth and the opportunities. And I guess if you're willing to ask for them, or if in Madera's case that, you get the opportunity to do that cross training, is really special. And I think so helpful.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we talk about the, just that perspective and the relationship building and the trust and understanding that this, the difference we say like in a job and a career, like this is where we spend our time. And so, we spend more time with our coworkers than we do with our families in general. And so I think that's why work families are created and why we're really trying to focus a little bit more intentionally, which is one of my favorite words, Josh. So thank you for using it. But it's, because if you're not intentional, then you're not moving you're not moving in a direction. You're just kind of going with the current. And I think that, if you go where the current takes you, sometimes it might be the place you're intended to go, but a lot of times it isn't. And if you're being intentional about where you want to go, then you have more of a shot of getting there, right? And it becomes a goal, or it becomes a path, or it becomes, or even a culture, or really just it could be a mission, a vision, whatever you want to call it. And so but if you don't have that intentionality, then, then you don't have really a direction. So I love that. I know that when you were talking about maintenance to office, I know several companies, mine included, we do like a role switch day. We do that often, a couple times a year, to where, they're going in and we have leasing associates that are learning how to turn units. And then we have, then we'll have maintenance associates. They're going to tour for a day. They're going to go over a lease. They're going to understand, they're going to respond to, reviews online, or, those types of things that they normally are like, oh, why are they always on their computer? Right. But it's that perspective, and it's something to where just being able to, dip your toe into that, I think is really critical, especially like you said, disruptors. There's lots of disruptors. Not all of them are fire, flood, or blood, but a lot of them are. And, if you have a fire on your community, it doesn't matter that I'm not a maintenance associate, because guess what? If I need a wet vac, or if I need to, go in and help, or banging on doors and evacuating, like those aren't things that have a title, So I think that's where hopefully not all of the situations are that drastic. Again, we have lots of just day-to-day stuff. but when your title and your role doesn't matter, like that's when you can see how well cross-trained a team really is, because they're able to step in seamlessly and, and do that. But do you have any success stories that you'd love to share, Josh? I know that you with Madera or even in your past, so you've probably seen a lot. But is there anything specific to Madera that you've seen that you'd love to share with our audience?
Well, I think the cross training has been the easiest place to recognize the rock stars. I mean, just simply because one, they crave the learning. And then I think the other part of it too is, when new positions come open, when there's an opportunity for the promotion, like I can't think of a single person that has been promoted in the Madera in any of our companies that did not receive some sort of cross training, that wasn't wholly invested in cross training in order to receive that next promotion. And it's not just because they were skilled in doing it, because that's what happened. They gained more skills, they gained more perspective of all and appreciation for the jobs, but they also bought into a cultural dynamic that you're looking to create on property as well. And so they're not just rock stars at their position, they're pillars in the type of culture we're trying to create. And so, I can think of a lot of folks who have gotten promotions and they are now moving up the ladder, so to speak. But they're doing so because cross training is not just something they participated in. It was at the heart of their career path, their career development. And so, I specifically in the back of my head right now can think of a new community manager that we have who just a few weeks ago was an assistant manager. And we had a person go on FMLA, but because of cross training, she became the perfect person to step into that role. And of course, we'll take care of the person who went on FMLA when they come back.
Sure.
But this person is now a wonderful success story for us because that cross training was at the heart of their job. It was at the heart of the culture of that property.
Yeah, and I think. Oh, go ahead. Sorry,
I was just going to ask Josh. You talked about leadership, but I was wondering if you had any specific tips regarding sort of flipping the mindset so that it's not about doing more for the property or more for the company, but that this is going to benefit you, the employee. So if there are any specific tips on how you switch that, I think that'd be really helpful for everyone.
Well, I mean, so like a lot of companies now, I'll give them a shout out because I definitely think they've cared for us. They've been a great vendor for us. But Swift Bunny, we've worked with them a bunch, right? We've done a lot of things with them as far as our companies go. And one of the things that we continue to see, and I think whether you work with them or anybody else, career paths is in the top 3 to top 5 major things employees want.
Right.
I don't want to be at a place where there's no career growth. And I understand that, right? I can understand that. I think any of us with any inch of ambition have that piece, right? Or even this security, wanting further security for our lives. And so I think the tip part of that is, I think when someone first comes in, it is, I do want to work here, but what can this company do for me? Like, what's the benefit to me, especially if they have options, as far as that goes. And so I think part of the tip is selling them on cross training being, that is how we do career paths. That's how we do career growth. Going back to that enlargement idea, the job enlargement. So the more things you learn how to do and the more ways in which you invest in other people, the easier it is for you to move up that ladder. That's the easiest way to do it. Plus, and again, this may be the HR person in me coming out, but we believe in merit increases. And so part of this is like, yes, you may have worked here for 50,000 years, but if you're just putting out the same amount and you're not really investing in others and you're not really investing, in growing with us, why would we be, motivated to reward you with more if you haven't given others more? And I think that's a big part of it, right? And I still think you have to come back to that thing I said earlier too with the tips. I think companies need to structure their growth, whether it's compensation or even career path growth, around the success of a property and the success of the properties. And so when you can do that, now all of a sudden everybody understands that collective success is my success. Yeah. And so there's no reason not to invest in the team now. And I think you weed out the people who don't want that. And they become the outlier as opposed to the norm. And then it's like, okay, you may be a nice person, but you may not want to work here anymore because that ain't how we do stuff, right? This is who we are and what we're about. So I think those are these things.
No, for sure. And that's what I was going to mention, just kind of as we're wrapping this up, is that, I hear the term reciprocity, so it's like if they're doing it for me, I'm going to continue to do that for everyone else. And then it becomes a reinforced cultural norm. And it becomes something that is, it's more expected, right? Than like, oh, wow, that's great. I get some cross training. It's just more of the fabric. But it's starting the conversation. It's building the trust. It's telling people the why. It's showing good examples of being able to say, hey, Nicole was, wanting to be a property manager, and then she was able to be cross-trained by Becca, and she took, so-and-so's FMLA and was able to show what they could potentially do. And that's what we're doing. We're betting on potential and being able to show that growth and development. So I think that type of reciprocity is really key as well. And like you said, when most of the company is doing it, the outliers will stick out really quickly, because they're more self-centered as opposed to servant leadership. So it's a different focus, because when you want to serve others, it's because you've been helped as well. And so I think that bigger picture is really critical. And I'm so glad that you were able to spend some time with us today. Cross training is something that I think it's a buzzword, like we've talked about, but really being intentional about it, ensuring that leadership is bought in, and then being able to get to the point to where you're, it's just part of your growth and development plan. I think it becomes less of a buzzword and more of a norm. So I really do appreciate you spending time with us today. I know Becca might have some housekeeping items for us, and we hope that you really, Josh, just continue to do what you're doing at Madera. I respect Madera as a company. I know that you guys have really put your money where your mouth is as far as cross training. So it's really great to hear from someone who I do feel is really walking the talk. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you both for having me.
Yeah. And then Becca, if you have some housekeeping items, then we can wrap this puppy up.
Hints from HR will be back in July 12th. And How to Speak Maintenance, our other podcast, will be live on June 28th. We'll be talking about kind of similar to this, or related. Teamwork makes the dream work. So join us on the 28th of June and on July 12th for our next shows. And we'll see everyone then. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
All right. See you in July.